Teraz ale už prejdeme k nášmu hlavnému hosťovi. Ja myslím, že už je pripravený a postupne príde na pódium. Nie je tu prvýkrát, totiž na začiatku sme hovorili, že máme tu 10. ročník DAADu a tak bolo celkom vhodné sa tak možno obzrieť a zaloviť v tej histórii, kto tu už bol, ale bol tu dosť dávno, teda v 2. ročníku a prezentoval len také svoje menšie veci. Už to bolo známe štúdio architektonické, ale neboli až takí veľkí. A teraz už sú a majú za sebou veľa úspešných realizácií. Dovolte mi teda predstaviť architekta, ktorý k nám prichádza zo štúdia LAN Architecture z Paríža, je jedným z 2 jeho zakladajúcich členov a volá sa Umberto Napolitano. Good evening, and take it away.
Let me have a picture of you. Hey. So, thanks for inviting me. I don't know if you just said, but I was here, kind of Bratislava gave me a lot of luck. I was here 10 years ago. This is a picture of that moment where with the studio we were traveling around Europe trying to understand what our generation was doing and how things were kind of similar and different in different countries. And so we came here, we stayed for a few days. We met those guys, and it was very, very nice to share a moment where they explain us what is going on in this city. And then they invite me for this festival the years after. Before that, we were visiting a different building. We had a dinner. One of the guests of the dinner now is the mayor of the city. So he also, like, I give him luck. And we visited a lot of iconic buildings. It was extremely interesting. Then I came, and it was raining, like today. I think I've never seen the sun in Bratislava, to be sincere. And then I came 3 years ago, and it was very interesting because I was part of the jury of the National Prize of Architecture. So I was, not me, but part of my studio was traveling around, visiting the different buildings here, and it was very nice. So first of all, I have to thank you to share with me this experience. And then I say to myself, but I have another strong link with the city. You know, my studio is from Paris, local architecture network, but I am Umberto Napolitano, originally from Naples. And I say to myself that if I will come another time here, I should thank someone. Because, you know, Naples is an incredible city. You have the Vesuvium, and then you have the history, and then you have, you know, you learn a lot of things. You learn how to survive, you learn how to relate to the others. But then all the Neapolitans, including me, we have an amazing passion. Since when we are child, we go literally every weekend, and I'm still doing that. You know, I was teaching in New York, in Columbia, now I'm teaching at DAAD. I live in Paris, but every time I can, I take the flight, I go back in Naples to see the football play. And you know who is the captain of our team for 10 years? In the last 10 years, it was this guy, a guy from Bratislava. So I say to myself, because of this palace, because the place I am now is not anymore with us, is in China. Is also, I know that you know, but is also the captain of the national team of Slovakia. So I say to myself, if I go there, I should thank the city to sharing with us this guy with who I have lost everything. I mean, we have never won 10 years, 12 years he was in Naples. We have won one small cup, but we have shared a lot of passion. So I say to myself, if someone, can you take me a picture with that? I will put in Instagram with the hashtag Marekamsik to thank him. But going back in this serious stuff, so that's lecture today make me a bit older too, because I just realized how much things we have done in these 10 years. So the studio was lucky enough to do more than 100 projects, extremely different in terms of sites, in terms of typology, places, country, economic situation. This is a diagram that shows the ongoing project in the studio that goes from 100 meters square to more than 100,000 meters square. Few of them, I will just share with you 4 or 5 projects, but this is an overview of things that we have done and that are ongoing. This is the highest wooden tower in Europe. This is a district that I will present at the end. Office building, institutional building, theater, another office building. The Grand Palais, which is the biggest French museum that we are redoing, and we will open with the Olympic Games in 2024. I'm sorry. Sport facility. This is the EDF, National Archive Office, a district in Hamburg, which has been done following a system which is called Baugruppen, where everyone can vote. Extremely democratic and extremely uninteresting. Social housing, student housing, the refurbishment of 160 district, a prison, which is almost finished. The prison arrives next week, actually, and we cannot publish it, obviously. You know, I was so naive that at the beginning, when we won the competition, I put the plan online, saying, oh, this... And then I received a phone call saying, you know, if someone would escape, don't help him. So the Fire and Rescue Center, student housing, and a few other projects. The studio is totally European. I am Italian. I'm this kind of pure product of Erasmus. You know, I left Naples for studying in Paris, and then I stayed, and then I opened up this. I'm saying that because Europe is very in a weird moment. I don't know what you feel here, but in France, the extreme right won the election, and in England, in Italy, and in other many countries, it's a moment where we need to support the European project. So, as I say to my father, which now is convinced, like all the old guys, that Europe is a bad thing, Europe is the place of the problem, I say to my father, like, I mean, your child is totally because of Europe. And the studio, it's like us, so this is, everyone comes, I mean, there are like 50 people, 10 are French, and the other come from all around Europe, bringing with them their own background. The studio is engaged in practice and theory, and I personally teach, and we wrote a book, we do exhibition, and we have been part of the different biennale with different projects. This was with Rem Koolhaas, where we displayed a research on facade. This was with Alejandro Aravena, where we showed 2 projects. One I will show to you now. And then the Biennale of Chicago, where other architects come to see our drawings. This is the last monography of the studio. I promised to the editor to use each occasion to advertise it, so you can buy it online with Amazon. And normally I start every lecture with a quote of Aldo Rossi. So in this monography, there is a nice part which is wrote by Luis Galliano, he's a Spanish critic, that said that our work can be synthesized with this expression, which is form follows form follows form. So everything turns around the word form, but I could add that even more important than form, there is the word city. And I quote Aldo Rossi with the architecture of the city, because it's one of these books that changed the way you look at the cities. And probably in this dichotomy that he defined in architecture of the city is the entire work that we do. What he said, it's very simple. He said that city, look, the metaphor, it's very extremely clear. City are artifact or handmade object, which means that as men we build piece by piece the cities. And so because of that, you can understand the city with rules, with geometry, volume. There could be a scientific approach of how to look at the city. So for an architect, the first thing is to understand that a city has a form, this form has been built, this form full of scientific logic, and we have to know that. We have to know very clearly that the form of Brasilia is extremely different than Tokyo and then New York. And every time we do a building, we have to consider this building just part of this large puzzle. I'm not saying that we have to follow the context. I'm not saying that we have to follow the form, but we just have to be the consciousness of that. Whatever we do, we have to see our large piece in those diagrams. But then there is another level, which Aldo Rossi called urban fact, which is this stratification of history, geography, history of economy, history of power, history of decision, history of randomly things or catastrophe that happen and that give to each of them a specific identity. So as an architect, you should know how to work in this abstract field, and then you have to make your own opinion in which is the identity of every city. How the city has its own strong specificity and how you consider that. So what we do in LAN is that we try to learn this scientific approach and we try to understand the world around us. We do that through, first of all, living, being with the others, try to be aware of what's happened. This festival is an extremely good example. In 9 years, I have seen here guests, 10 years, I have seen here guests, which are the proof that the people that organize this event, they are aware of what's happened around. And the same thing for us, but it's not only about architecture, it's more about what's happened in the world. I mean, in this moment, there was an election last week that for me, it's historical. It's the first time that in Europe, the Greens, okay, which is the party that probably will stand the ideological approach of the future in the next few years, they gained in a certain sense. So take a party, architecture is politics. Whatever is the building, even if we do not stand for something, just the act of building in a city, it's a politic act. So as an architect, we have to know that, and we have to decide from what, project means throw something far. Throw something far. So it's like build piece of the future. We have the chance to decide in which future we want to live. And this is what we have to do through all the project. So we do that another time through just using forms. But the word forms in architecture is overused. So I will share with you the definition of Paul Klee, which I found extremely interesting. Form must on no account ever be considered as something to be go over with, as a result, as an end, but rather as a genesis grow essence. Form as a semblance is an evil and dangerous spectre. So form is not how things appear. Form, it's the beginning of a movement, or the potential that you give to an object, to an architecture, to a piece of art, to evolve with something that evolves. In our case, society and cities. So in LAN, we work defining the space for this movement. We work form that has to move. And every project has this specific strategy and this specific space where forms can kind of evolve. The first example, it's very clear of that, the path, that research that we do, It's in Bègle. Bègle, it's in Bordeaux. It's close to the, I'm sorry, or I will forget that after. It's close to the station of Bordeaux, but it's another city that was built in the 60s, following a specific model, another time the form of the city. So in France, after the war, in 14 years, they have built over 14 million housing. 14 million housing in 14 years, following the same architectural model, which was the one coming from modern. So I know that here that has a different result, but in France, those examples, they were the place where in 2005 there was a riot. They are the 50 more violent places in France. They are 50 of those what we call cités, those banlieues. This is exactly the place where, not only for architecture, even because the politics put all the ex-colony, but those are very critical places. Bègle was one of these places that where in 2005 there was the riot, and where people don't know what was private, what was public. I mean, when you are there, you don't know if this one stands to this building or this one stands to this space. So at certain point, you don't know what is private, what is collective, what is private. And this, in that particular case, it's one of the most big problems. If you don't know how to use the space, if you don't know who has taken care of the space, probably you will have problem. In any case, in France, we have problem with this typology. So there was one man, Noël Mamère, which was the president of the French Green Party years and years ago. He has become the mayor of the city, and he came, and after 2 years, he did two things. The first one, that he connected the center of the city with the center of Bordeaux through a network of tram and different connection, and then he destroyed everything. And he did that, and on that, he did an international competition to rebuild that part of the city. This competition was won by a Dutch studio for the master plan called Tania Conco, and she had a very simple idea of the city, which is buildings are masses, they are block. Buildings and block are the same things, like in the old Mediterranean or historical center in the cities around Europe. And the facade, it's the limit between what is public and what is private. When I enter a facade, I have a courtyard. The courtyard is collective just for the building, not for the public in the exterior. And the buildings are big enough to define the street and kind of be, the facade is also the facade of the public space. So it's clearly like all the Italian, French, or whatever is the city, the historical center, made it by 17, and today they are like that. And we were invited for these three buildings to build up those masses and find the right strategy. But the point is that the competition was in 2008, and with the economical crisis, the investor, instead to build 14,000 meters square, they just ask for 6,000 meters square. In other words, the entire urban project could not work because we didn't have enough surface to build those masses that has to relate to those streets. So there was this gray space, enough interesting because the urban rules allow us to occupy, but we don't have the money to do it. And so we were really very naive, very young, and we decided to propose a model which was in between the single-family house and the collective housing. And this model has an abstract form, which is a superposition of single-family house in a collective structure, in a collective form. So in that case, you don't have no neighborhood, and you can when you buy these, you have for free that space, and you could do what you want. So the idea was, and then you can share, you have the quality of a single-family house, like you enter your own house from a garden or from an exterior space, you see the facade of your house, you don't have direct neighborhood, but then you share in the structure, you share in the structure, in the vertical point, all the collective system, the water, the electricity, the structure. I mean, what means a collective building interesting is this idea of sharing resources. So we tried, and we proposed those drawings. We adapt this diagram to the form of the plot, and we won. We won the competition, which is totally crazy, because instead to pay one facade, you have to pay 4 facades every time. And there was a competition where there was no money to build. So in a certain sense, they were enough naive, and we were enough young to propose something that was very complex to do. So we spent like 7 years to build it. And they were enough dreamer to accept a model which is amazing. I mean, the building is 7 meters large. Every room has 3 expositions, 1 in the street, 1 in the courtyard, 1 in his own space. And it's very large. And you get for free the same size, minimum of your living room, sometimes of the entire apartment. So we won't. We say to ourselves, okay, we have to build. So we did it in a very naive way. We tried to build a structure and then build the minimum of prefabricated panels that we assembled together. With 4 panels, we did, or 6 panels, and then there was a sunscreen. There is 6 panels to do the 3 buildings. And then it was not enough. That was a document of competition. The idea was 2015, and we hope that in 2055, people will start to occupy those space. And it was not enough, and we had to work to split and to cut all the intermediary that made the price. So we worked literally with 85 different enterprises to get the best price. At the end, we did it. So that's the building with the void. And as you can see, there is this sliding facade that allows to close the building when you want. So if you are the owner of that space, you have already the facade, and you can build in the back what you want, or you can use like a terrace or like a winter garden. So literally, our office normally works a lot with details, materials, but here it was not the case. Those are the different typologies. So literally this one, when you have this one, you have this one for free. When you have this one, you have this one for free. And that it goes down in size. When you have a small one, you have a small one, etc., etc. So it's literally an assemblage of all the prefabricated pieces that we could find that were interesting in the relationship between how much you pay and how much you get in terms of quality. But what we paid was the space at the end. So that's the night, the system of the shutter, the first inhabitant. They bring bikes, they do things, they leave. And it was very nice, because when Ravenna invited us to exhibit this project in Venice, we was back. As an architect, you never know in reality if what you do works or not. You need time, you need life cycle to see if in reality, if your theoretical approach or your idea of this future really works. But it was nice because we have a film that I will not show you, but and we were there 2 years after the construction, seeing how those people start to occupy those space. Someone has built a room for a baby, someone else just used for a jacuzzi, another one. And it was nice because you remember the negative image of this district has been totally erased by this economical offer. I mean, this was a cheap building, and with those prices you could have the double of the surface. So through that, in this void, we had the space for the movement of the form. The idea was that the building can evolve with the times, it can go back in its original shape, but we had this idea of building something for a request, but also for something that has to come. I just bought this book on forms in Japan. I was there, and I found these diagrams, which is for me enough representative of how I understand the idea of form. So form is this concept in the middle, which is made with materials, with techniques, in that case hand, with an objective, a purpose, and coming from a concept, an idea. And in the middle of all that, they are all related to the solution, which is this form. The intelligence of the form is the way that lets space to this form to evolve. The first example, and that you have to evolve this in climate, space, and time and history. The first example I show you, we had this possibility through the void, but you understand that it's a really rare case. You cannot apply that everywhere, and it's very rare that you can build and someone do not build. Normally, the idea is to create density, so when you have the possibility, you will build. So I show you another example which has another kind of intelligence, and it's in Paris. It's in the north of Paris. It's in this district, which is the last piece ongoing of the city. It's in the north. It's called Batignolles. It's just Renzo Piano just finished a tribunal here, a courthouse. There is a park. I mean, we were invited for this small piece, this one. And when we were invited, we received a brief. In the brief, there was this image that it's exactly the city that we are building everywhere in Europe. A park, a very sustainable idea of how ecology has to be translated in plant and greens. That was before the vertical wood in Milano, but it's almost the same idea, like this idea of bringing green in the city. And then you call different architects, and in function of the talent they have, you do a new district. But the thing is that when you see that, you will never say to me that you are in Paris. We miss this level that I showed at the beginning, the idea of identity, the idea of the ADN, the DNA of the city that has been translated through architecture and has to be really clear. So when we were invited for that, I asked to myself, what's Paris? And Paris is very clear as a city. It's an extrusion on 27 meters high of the entire fabric of the city. And the void, it's very small, and it's extremely intelligent. You know, Paris is the densest city in Europe. It's between the 5 dense cities in the world. Paris has the density of Shanghai. Paris in the 11 has the density of Dhaka. Paris has no tower. So it's an extremely intelligent model. Many people, they even don't know that it's a dense city. They even don't know that it's twice denser than Manhattan. So when you see that, we ask to ourselves, why that happened? How that happened? What we have to learn? Density is something that we have to know now. And you know, when you build dense somewhere, you are saving a piece of land somewhere else. Now, the first consciousness act for the planet is to stop the expansion of the city. Stop the expansion of using all the land and try to deal with density and understand how to make dense, but with quality. So Paris could be an example. So we start to studying that, and Paris has been built with a project, a clear project. So when there is a clear project, you just have to study it. And we did it. We say to ourselves, let's learn something. And it's a project that has been done by these men. And when you see the application of the project, so after this building, we did an exhibition, and then we did a book, and then I did 2 years at Columbia on that. So this is a mix of few information that I get after and the intuition that we had with this building. But those are all the buildings that has been built between 1953 and 1914 in Paris. 60 years. It's 70% of the city. 70% of the city has been built in 60 years. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's a new city. And when you compare that to the street that has been done in the same period, you understand that the city has totally been a project. And this project, it was possible through many different things. You know, this is the extrusion of the void of the city. And as you can see, it looks like the modern city. So the void in itself is a project in Paris, but I will not go further that. This is another lecture. But in that case, we learned from, this is the tools, all the buildings I showed in the map before, They were the first investment building. We had a figure before which was called Hôtel Particulier, like a palace you build for your family. And this is the first, is the first building which we called immeuble de rapport, investment building, that has been built to be rented. So the entire city was built as an investment through family that had places somewhere else. So they went to the bank, they said, I want to build a building, and the bank said, okay, I will give you a loan, then you rent it, and then you make property through the loan. This system has been generated a typology because people didn't know who was to live there. So it's a very generic typology that in 1 century has become office, hotel, social housing, nightclub, theater. Every function has been included in this construction. So we asked ourselves how to replicate that today, what we could learn from that, how we can study. And more than that, that generate identity. You know, I'm showing you that there is no street, no church, no palace. You see this picture and you know that you are in Paris. You exactly know that you are in Paris. Because the windows, because the guardrail, because the roof, because the DNA of the city, it's until the last piece of the puzzle. So we start to study it, this building, and there are a few rules which are very basic, which Haussmann gives at that time. The first one is the fact that 50% of the facade is in glass, 50% facade is in stone. You know, Haussmann was there when the people go to buy the property, the ground, and he said, okay, I don't know, I am not interested in what you will do in the back of this facade. I just want that you align your windows to your neighborhood, you make this proportion, you use these materials, and then you buy pieces on this catalog. The city has been done with catalogs. So when you have, there is 3 classes of investment in function of how much money you had to buy in these 3 catalogs. So first things, the facade is very generic. It allows to you do a living room, a bedroom, whatever you want, just by the fact that there is a module and it's repetitive and it's easy to understand. Then there is a succession of different volume. It's from 4 to 5 meters on the ground floor, 2.8, 3.2 on the first floor, and then 4.5, 3.3, 3.3, 3.2. This looks like nothing. But after the Industrial Revolution, when we start to standardize our construction, we start to use exactly the same height. I don't know how it is here, but in Paris, when you do an housing building, you do slabs 3 meters high. When you do an office building, you do 3.6 or 3.7 in function of the techniques that you have to use. So buildings are totally monofunctional because the space has been tinkered with dimension that has already a function. Here, what's happened with the time is the fact that normally offices are on the first floor because there are 4.5, and then there is housing, and then there is like a student housing here, and then there is like chamber that you can share with friend or guest house on the roof. There is a volumetric offer in this building which is extremely interesting to create the city. What's the city? It's an hybridation of, I don't know if it's my neighborhood, I don't know if it's an office, I don't know if it's an houses. There is this create collectivity that this building already has in his blood. Then everything gets prefabricated, as I said before. The structure is very clear. And then there is this genius thing where the ground floor, the commercial ground floor, could be attached to the first floor without using the common stairs. And that allows the commercial space of the city to double its surface or to cut it by 2 in function of who is the owner. If McDonald's arrives, he takes the ground floor and the first floor. If it's a small bakery, they just take the ground floor and they live on the first floor. This is the entire city of Paris. The entire city. The fact that Paris is very alive, the fact that wherever you are, you find commerce, is because of that, because you have this possibility to double the surface. So we translate that, and that goes over the style, that goes from a classic style until the Art Nouveau on the entire century. These 5, 6 rules, they stayed whatever was the language of the building. if you see the section of the time, you can find that. There is this idea of the society that was very rich in terms of uses. So we try to translate that in a contemporary way. So we build up a proposal where the structure is in the facade. The facade is divided like an office building, so it's 1.35 meters, the module, and the windows is 1.35. The ground floor can be connected to the first floor to change its function, and then everything is built around one window, which is this module and these windows. And when you need loggia, you just push back these windows, and tomorrow you can just move on and go back. And we were even more radical, so there was a proposal of the competition. One was an housing, the other was an office. It was enough brave, because, you know, it was a competition for an housing building, and you arrive and you said, you know what, I don't care. I don't care what you say. I want to do a building. So that, even for the client, was brave to take it at the end and build it. It was public. Then everything is in the facade. Water, electricity, structure, sunscreen, windows, everything. Everything is prefabricated to this module. So if tomorrow you have to change something, you just know where you have to go to plug your new system. And the building is like a Lego. Everything is in concrete with insulation, then the different system. And he gives back that, which is a very straight building. Those are the loggia. But then because it's a triangle that goes in this corner building, this collection of corner building that is very Parisian. I love this picture. Obviously, the typology are very different because, you know, the facade is everything. So you are very free to do. And even if it has been not conceived to be an housing, more a generic space, it's very comfortable to live there because it's all glass. It's very rare for Paris. And this is the next section. So in that case, the form moves because his own intelligence, because he's ready to be, is generic enough to be many things. Sometimes, I love this expression. Brancusi said, every sculpture is a form in movement. I have to say that more than that, it's, for us, every architecture is a form in movement. And I asked to myself from where that comes from. And another times, in Naples, in the south of Italy, but I am sure here too, there is the idea of architecture is linked to legacy, is linked to the fact that you build for someone, but you already think from the next one. So, you know, those are the typical structure of the house where people leave the steel because probably their child will build another floor on the top. This specific moment where you allow a structure to be hyperstatic, a structure to guess a new scenario, for me is architecture. For me, that's architecture. This small structure with 5 steel, it's the maximum you can have in your mind in the way you have to design. How do you choose a form? That's one of the most, how do you read it? As an architect, how do you understand form? And I love this expression of Matisse that said, we want something else. We work towards serenity through simplification of idea and form. The ensemble is our only ideal. Details lessen the purity of the line and harm the emotional intensity. We reject them. And I can say that even in architecture, we reject details. We have to know enough the details, the techniques, and the construction to make them disappear. The materials, the way we build, has to be strong enough to show the form, to show how we have to use. You know, when I put this chair, or I put something of 45 centimeters high, the first things I will do, I will sit in, because I know how that works. When it's 1.10 meters, I will be like that, because I know how that works. Buildings are the same things. If they if we understand form, we use it. There is probably the most intense photographer of architecture I know. He's a Japanese, Sugimoto. And he has done pictures of architecture, of classic architecture, that for me are totally revealing and explaining what I am saying. This is one, for example. You see, it's totally blurred. You don't see the materials. Those are 3 meters by 3 meters. You don't see the materials. You don't see nothing. But you know where you are. You know what's the idea of this building. Everything is there. So same things. I say to my student every time, you blur your eyes, and if the building stand, this is architecture. So this strongness of form for Farnsworth House is everything. 3 columns and 2 slabs. La Villa Savoie. A sunset on the sea. This is fantastic, no? And so this project is a bit one of this form. It's a project that has been done without even thinking 1 second of its function. It's a project that just followed the logic of the city, but the story is longer than that. It's in Lille. You know, if some of you is familiar with Lille, Lille is this city where Rem Koolhaas has done the master plan. And when I was student, so is that. When I was student, I don't know how many of you are architects and how many of you are architects of my generation. But there was a book that all of us, we have to have. I mean, it was small, medium, large, extra large. There was different edition with different color, different collection. If you had the first edition, probably you can hang out with the nice lady. It was a very important piece to be part of the students that were cool. It was the first one that has small, large, and extra large. And in small, large, extra large, Koolhaas has wrote a piece which is called Bigness, with the idea that you don't have to think the city starting from the void of the city, with the street, with the square, but you can think building large enough that they become masses and they can change with the different economical pushes and pressure. So the city could be an assemblage of 3, 4 extremely large buildings. And Lille was the place where he experienced the first time this theory. So it was because it was a city that was built, those are images from small, medium, large, extra large, totally inspired by the continuous monument of Superstudio. And it was a place where this is a sketch of this city. But you have no idea, this city is like 10 times the center of Lille. And you just see 5 buildings and a roof. So those are other sketches of that period. And this is the how things has become after 20 years. So we were invited to do these pieces. And I was so proud because it was the last pieces of the Rem Koolhaas masterclass ongoing since when I was a student. Okay? The idea that you don't do a project, you let the building grow in function of how people invest, the economic pressure, and then you cut the land and something stayed at the end. And these things that stayed so I visited this hypothetical city, and I discovered that the scale was totally huge. I mean, those images of people get lost in this landscape are typically real. I mean, there are no commerce, there are no street, and there are these huge masses. At the point that the city said, okay, let's finish this chapter, let's open up another chapter where we do a small-scale city, which is called Euralille 2. So we were the last pieces of Euralille 1 that has to open Euralille 2. So he has to go from this bigness to a domestic city. And he has to confront with this landscape, which is kind of totally crazy. So what we did, we asked to ourselves, as you can see, he called this street Avenue Le Corbusier. It's totally megalomaniac, but he called Avenue Le Corbusier, and our things was the end of the biggest avenue where the two stations are there. And it was a very, very, very small building, 4,000 meters square. So with 4,000 meters square, we have to end up all this huge system of towers of 160 meter high, platform of 2 kilometers, with these small, tiny pieces. So we think and then we said, okay, let's imagine that building could be an icon when you come from the highway. It could be a tower when you see that from the main avenue. It could be the beginning of the changing the scale to open up this new domestic city, and then being a corner building when you come from the station. And we just generate this form, very strange, cutting all the pieces in function of the view, and then we fit the program inside. So it's kind of a sculpture. So this is the tower when you come from the Avenue Le Corbusier. The building is this. Then the icon when you come from the highway. And then this ground floor that allow to create these two streets that were not there. The corner building when you come from the station. And then the change of scale that allow to build buildings of 3-4 floors close to it. And even the skin has been tweaked, saying, okay, because we are in this 360 situation, we highlight windows in the city, and we start to point at different parts of Lille. So it's a kind of kaleidoscope with copper and glass, which design windows everywhere. The facade is based on 4 modules. So one is semi-transparent, one is stripes, one is totally transparent, and one is totally opaque. And that's all. So as you can see, this project is, and then it gives back different office floor, which were interesting because they were not standard. So different company, the one that searched just 200 meters square, they could rent the last floor, and the one which searched 1,000 meters square, they rented the first floor. So all the materials are going in that direction. How to make an abstraction to make the form readable. So now is not anymore the time we can use this one, but I really like it. That's why I do not translate in English, but I will tell you, it's the materials desire the form as a complement in same way the female attract the male. So in 2019, this cannot be saying, but the idea is very clear. There is a strict relationship, this is Aristotle, a strict relationship between materials, form, and abstraction. And this is one topic that we work in the studio, that you can see, those are different facades we do. You never read the scale, you never read the windows, you never read the different, you even don't know how many floors I'm watching you, to the idea at the end to reveal the form. So the last project I will show, it's in these 10 years, we grow up in the scale. And now we are building a district where we do master plan, urban coordination, and then we build. And we just ended up one, which is in Nantes, which is a bit like an addition of all the things that we have learned in these 10 years. So I will go very fast because it's many buildings. But the idea is, the question was how to build a district, how to build a piece of the city with different buildings, which is the value that you can have in the public space. Another time, which is the idea of the city. And so Nantes is north of France, and is a very known place because the island of Nantes was industrial. Then at a certain point, industry goes outside the city, and this piece of land in the very center of the city has to be built. And it was the first time in France where before buildings, arts arrive. So this is Daniel Buren. And then they found a very funny strategy where they built up machine that could walk around the tourist. So the island has been a place of tourists that grows the cost of the island, and then they start to build. So there was already life there, and then they are continuing to build this new part of the city. We were invited to answer to a question which is here, the former industry, which is included, is this one, which is between a block system and a modern city, which is being a courtyard building and a block idea of the city. And obviously there is the river, which is in the other side, which is extremely interesting. So then we destroyed it, and then we started the competition. We just left these 40-meter high trees, a system there, and then the rest was almost empty. And we proposed a system which was supposed to make a kind of the missing piece between this system and this one. So we asked ourselves, can we find a form that kind of complete the uncompleted question that the city was asking before? Can we imagine a form that make the synthesis between the different typology and the different buildings which are already there? So we worked with the three strategy. The first one was to try to connect the river with the street, try to work volumes in feedback of the existing volume. So like when there was an high building, we just were back to make another one and create a public space between the two. And every time it was literally an interpenetration between what was already there and how do the volume sit in this new city. And then we worked in three different levels. The level of programming, so there was a school that arrives. This school can use the restaurant. This school bring student housing. This school was attractive enough to create housing, office. So everything was step-by-step programmed by the private investor. And we did it thinking that all the pieces of the public space, in reality, everything is private. Everything has been built by Kaufman and Broad, which is an American investor that now is working in Europe. So, but we dealt with him and the city to say, okay, the city allows us to build that, but we have to offer public space which are related to the different building. And then we create the things that we won the competition, we update the building, and we start to work with the identity. So what I'm saying from the beginning, it's how to deal with density. So this new district, it's dense like some of the districts in Paris, which means it's extremely dense. And it's extremely contemporary, and it's not based on the historical idea of the city because he has to make a synthesis. So we shaped all the form to take the double advantage. Means the advantage of being dense and high, so you have the view, you have the light, and generate enough ground to be programmed. So the work was that. The format changed step by step. So you have luxury housing, the school, the student housing, the parking for everyone, which is part of this building, social housing, office, and housing. And each of them has a public space. And then we decide to take for us 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings and open up to other architects for the other 2 buildings. And so with simple idea, gradient of vegetation, replanting what we destroyed, create the circulation for the car just in 2 parts, so you can go with the car here and in the square, but the rest is totally pedestrian. And then different uses for the different garden. And then obviously a ground that unify everything, that gives this identity, a little bit like in the center here. You can feel the ground, you can feel the color, you can feel that the city is made by the ground, and then the partition of the space, a study of sun and wind, and how to deal with the water, so a plaza that when it's raining become a fountain and distribute the water everywhere. So, and then aligning everything to create this street, create a second landscape, like people can live a certain height and see one each other in this elevated geography, and then create the axis and highlight on the trees. Then we worked with the others, giving rules, and we said, okay, you should work with certain geometry. We should think of the void and the public space like it's a result of what we design in all the facade, each of us. And then this idea of layering the geography and the uses of the building. So you have the public space, but you have also the collective space, which are situated in a certain height. And then we start to work with them to increase the design, and we end up with that, with an iconic building that we design on the river, the school, the parking, the social housing, and the other two architects that design the office and the social housing. So the first building is that, and the scheme is very, very sophisticated. The idea was to create an icon that can be the landmark of the district, that be abstract enough. You don't have to understand which is the typology. And in the same times, you have to let the freedom to the people to put their washing machine outside on the balcony if they want. So we think about which kind of facade we can use to create loggia. So there is this window that slides in top and down. There are two windows, one which look directly, the second one which look down. And then sometimes it's not loggia and you have directly the window, and those are sunscreen. So those work in that sense. It's included in the skin and gives back this very abstract building, which you can look here. And on the river, it became the sign of this new district. The entrance of the building with the bike parking. The different flats, each of them has a balcony. And more you go up, more they are interesting, obviously. So this is an interior of all these windows, a duplex. The loggia, which is composed by those kind of materials. And in the night, this aluminum take all the light and play with the reflection. And it completes, in a certain sense, what was already there, also in terms of composition. It's very new, that's why I'm looking at the screen, because we just finished it last week. The second building is the school, easiest. It's one module, and then there is this common space. The school, it's Vattel and Odalis. As you can see, the public there and the public there. And the structure has been thinking to be totally free here. And this is this public space. The third building, it's very nice because it's a parking. And in the ground floor, there are restaurants where the students from the school, they work in the restaurant down, and the public can go and they live on the top with another system of concrete. So the parking, and then you go up and you have the courtyard here, which is on the same level of the public space which is here, and the same level of the building and surrounding. And every time you are here, you don't see a very high building, you see a small building. The idea is that you feel the density by the fact that you have view everywhere, and in the same times when you are in the street, the building looks small. Those are the courtyard. Social housing, this is from Abinale Ropard. This is the architect we invite. It's a building where the plan is totally the facade, and he works with these materials, taking different light, just with a slightly very economic facade. You can see here when the sun is yellow, that gives back those. Then the office building, which is half housing, half office. And the social housing, which is kind of the child of the building I just showed you at the beginning, but in a different shape, but with the same system. And everything turns around this different garden. So this is the existing Oaks Garden. This is Brosset Place, where become a fountain when this is the student housing garden. This is called the Yellow Garden, where people of the neighborhood can play, I don't know how you call it, but, you know, steel balls that you... And then you have the Verger, the White Garden, and the entrance garden. So the first one is that, and we have this huge 40 meters high building, trees. Then you have the square, where, you know, everything is collected there, and when it's the rain is very intense, all these things is inclined and it becomes full of water. Until here. The student garden, where there are those shapes that gives back different uses. This small yellow garden, I mean, you don't see the yellow now because it's really very like, those are picture of now. And in here is this sport stuff. And then you have the child garden, which is supposed to have 1 meter high vegetation with this labyrinth. Then the street, here, very De Chirico. The Verger, in the back here, south, it's the things where you can, those trees grows apple. And the entrance. I love this picture because it shows the verticality, and at the same time, when you put that with the one on the ground, you understand the duality of this intervention. This little Manhattan. Thank you very much.
Dámy a páni, ladies and gentlemen, Umberto Napolitano. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.